And joining us now to help us get up to speed on the latest between the merger of Canadian Pacific and Kansas City Southern, we welcome in the executive director of the Soy Transportation Coalition, Mike Steenhoek, is with us here today. Mike, always a pleasure to catch up with you, sir. I hope you're doing well.
I am doing fine. Thanks for having me, Jesse. Good to be with you.
Let's jump in. Walk us through, get us up to speed here. I know this last week, the STB, the U.S. Surface Transportation Board, has approved the Canadian Pacific acquisition of Kansas City Southern. So, what does that mean? Can you just get us up to speed to today with where we stand now?
Yeah, and so this was a ruling that was issued by the government agency, Surface Transportation Board, that has responsibility and jurisdiction over approving any kind of merger and acquisition. It's affiliated with the U.S. Department of Transportation, and this process started in 2021, in March of 2021, when Canadian Pacific announced its intention to acquire Kansas City Southern, and then eventually it went to the Surface Transportation Board for a pretty lengthy review process, and then ultimately the decision was made to allow it to proceed. It's going to be effective April 15th. Now, obviously, there's going to be a pretty elongated time period before the two railroads are fully and seamlessly integrated, but that it does become official on April 15th. And so what that means is you've got two of the larger, what are called Class 1 railroads, and that's a distinction based on revenue that these railroads are able to achieve, and there's 7 of them operating in the United States. The 6th largest, Canadian Pacific, will acquire the 7th largest, Kansas City Southern, and once that combination occurs, it'll still be the smallest of the now 6 Class 1 railroads. And so for agriculture, the feedback is pretty diverse. You have some who are really concerned with any kind of prospect of two larger railroads combining. And there's reason for that, because we do have a history of seeing mergers and acquisitions within the rail sector result in a decline of service or higher rates. So that's real, and that's something that we obviously need to be concerned with. There are others who believe that this will provide enhanced marketing opportunities for some agricultural shippers who are located, say, on the Canadian Pacific line, and up to this point, they really are restricted to the geographic regions served by the Canadian Pacific. Now, with the acquisition of the Kansas City Southern, that will open up new geographic regions in the South Central United States, even more notably into Mexico, that they up to this point haven't been able to enjoy. So it really kind of spans the spectrum as far as what it will mean to agriculture and what the perspectives have been up to this point. I think it really is just something that we're going to have to wait and see. I mean, we appreciate that the Surface Transportation Board has imposed a longer review process, because they really want to make sure that the advertised benefits of this acquisition end up coming to fruition. And so hence the reason for that elongated review period. And we think that's healthy.
Well, now you mentioned that April date it will become effective. Is this the final hurdle? Are we over any hurdles left here to make this official, or is there a chance for petitions to possibly stop this? How does that all work, Mike?
Yeah, there are some opportunities up to this point to issue any kind of request for reconsideration, but again, this process has been going on for 2 years now, and so there's been a lengthy process when the Surface Transportation Board has been reviewing it. One of the components of that is to really invite any kind of perspective, either supportive or opposed to that merger. So really, during this time period, that's been that door has been open for those perspectives to be voiced. And so I'm not sure what any additional perspective there remains out there that hasn't been expressed up to this point. So I expect it to move forward on that April 15th date, unless there's something that's totally out of unexpected that surfaces. I don't expect that. So I think it really is something that we're in the process of waiting to see what the impact will be, and certainly hopeful that'll provide benefit to agricultural shippers.
Well, and as you mentioned as well, it will still be the smallest of the Class 1 railroads, but that connectivity basically from Canada through the US to Mexico, that seems like that is the biggest bright spot and opportunity for shippers throughout agriculture, just having, a rail line that spans all three countries here in North America.
Yeah, and that was one of the reasons why the Kansas City Southern, even though it was by far the smallest of the Class 1 railroads, what made it such an attractive acquisition is because they've got, more than any other railroad, a seamless network into the Mexican market. Where other railroads, they have to have agreements with other railroads where there's kind of a more of a baton getting handed off from one railroad, US, to a Mexican railroad, whereas Kansas City Southern actually had their own network within Mexico. So the fact that you've got this single line service, Canada, US into Mexico, and Mexico is obviously a very strong market for US agriculture, particularly the soybean industry. So we're hopeful that it'll provide some enhanced marketing opportunities for that. And one of the things that a lot of shippers understand is that the more diverse your supply chain is, the better. So if you're a shipper and up to this point, it's basically movements to the Pacific Northwest, obviously they're going to be attracted to the prospect of being able to tap into maybe the South Central United States or into Mexico, which they haven't been able to do up to this point. Now, the argument can also be, well, that provides greater access for Canadian agriculture to penetrate into the Mexican market. So, there's a lot of pros and cons, that the potential pros and cons that really won't be manifest until some time is allowed to occur. And so again, our perspective is we're certainly hopeful that it'll provide benefit to US agriculture. We think it certainly merits real intense scrutiny as we move forward to make sure that the benefits of that don't just accrue to the shareholders. We're fine with them making money, but we also want to see this being an example where you've got a merger that actually provides benefit to the customers.
Well, great stuff, Mike. I should ask you real quick as well, since we have you on. Let's get an update on the river situation. We're heading into the spring planting season. Wondering how those river levels are doing and what the outlook is there as we get into spring.
We're in a much better position than we were in the fall of last year. A lot of attention, and rightfully so, was devoted to those historic low water levels on the Mississippi River and throughout the inland waterway system. It really became most acute in about that third week of October. Fortunately, since then, we've had some meaningful rainfall, some precipitation. So it's elevated water levels. So you're not seeing the restrictions of barge transportation that we saw late last year. And while we don't have the intense export activity that we see in the fall, this time of the year gets to be pretty active for northbound transportation of things like fertilizer via barge. And so having an inland waterway system that's open for business, that doesn't have restrictions, that's really important. So we're very happy that things are in a much better position. But one thing we keep in mind is there still is a lot of ground in the United States that's behaving like a big dry sponge. So when you've got precipitation that occurs, it first gets absorbed into the ground, which is good for the farm ground. But as far as having that water meander into streams and into rivers and then improving navigation, it has less of an impact on that. So I think the bottom line is it is very possible that you could have the pendulum swing if we've got a dry spring, to go into maybe inhibited conditions on the inland waterway system. We're obviously hopeful that doesn't occur. We're in a better position, but it's something that we need to keep our eyes tuned for.
Well, Mike, great thoughts, great and observations as well. Anything else you're watching on the transportation front here as we work our way into spring planting season that we need to keep an eye on?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we're just going to really continue to see throughout the course of this year, as more and more of the funding provided by the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act that was signed into law by the president in actually November of 2021, more and more of that money is being deployed to the various states. but we continue to have really significant infrastructure inflation. So the cost of building these bridges and these locks and dams and these ports, they're becoming more and more expensive, and it's eroding a lot of that additional funding that's being provided. So, while that was something that we celebrated, this additional federal funding, it's the taxpayer dollar is not getting the bang for its buck that it normally does. And so we're going to continue to see a lot of comments being made and announcements being made by federal, state, and local government about, well, we expected this project to cost this, and now we're having to revise it up to this. So we were planning on this project being done now, and now it's going to have to be done later. So I think there's going to be a lot of those kind of announcements this year, and it's just a reminder of the fact that this inflation, it's not just a development for us at the grocery store or at the gas pump. It's also it rears its head when it comes to building and maintaining and improving our infrastructure.
Well, a lot of things to watch, and I know we'll stay close with you as more issues come about. With that, Mike Steenhoek, Executive Director of the Soy Transportation Coalition, thank you for joining us here today. We appreciate the time.
Thank you, Jesse.